In this video, we are going to have a detailed look at Cambridge C1 Advanced Reading and Use of English. What a name! We are going to have a look at the different parts, some good strategies, tips and tricks, as well as general ideas that can help you save time and score higher marks. Hi and welcome to Teacher Phil, where I help people like you pass their Cambridge exams. When it comes to reading and use of English, my students always have tons of questions. And usually, if a candidate struggles in the exam, it is typically because of reading and use of English. But don't worry too much. In this video, we are going to answer all of your questions. And by the end of it, you will feel a lot more confident and just like you were born to do it. In C1 Advanced, there are 4 exam papers: Reading and Use of English, Writing, Listening and Speaking. Reading and Use of English combines 2 tests: Reading and Use of English. There are 8 parts in total in this paper, with parts 1, 5, 6, 7 and 8 belonging to the reading portion, while parts 2, 3 and 4 are use of English. You get 1 hour and 30 minutes to complete everything, which includes transferring all your answers onto a separate answer sheet. As this takes around 5 minutes, you are left with more or less 1 hour and 25 minutes to finish all of the different tasks, and with a little bit of calculating, we'll get to around 10.5 minutes per task. As there are 2 tests combined in this paper, Reading and Use of English counts 40% towards your overall mark in C1 Advanced. You can see there's quite a lot to do, but you don't have much time, so it is really important that you know exactly what you do in the exam. But enough with the introduction, and let's get into some detail. In part 1, you have to read a short text with 8 gaps. And for each gap, you have to choose from 4 options, A, B, C or D, the correct word for each gap. Firstly, it is always a good idea to read the text quickly. This helps you get a general idea of the text and also an idea of the vocabulary. Next, you want to analyze what's around the gaps. Have a look at what's before and after the gap and look out for signal words which can help you find the correct option. As an example, let's have a look at the first 2 gaps. Looking at gap number 1, the signal word is trust, which collocates only with a limited number of words in English. And in this example, the only option we have is win. In the second gap, the signal word is into. Like in this example, you often find prepositions as the signal words, which we can only use with one of the possible answers. In this case, that would be inside. Repeat this process for the other gaps and you're done. However, I always recommend reading the text one more time in order to catch possible mistakes. And that's it. Part 1 is done, but we still have 7 more to look at, so let's keep going. In part 2, you have to fill in 8 gaps in a short text, just as in part 1. But in part 2, you don't get any possible answers. You decide what the missing word must be. Part 2 mainly focuses on grammar words, and together with parts 3 and 4, it belongs to use of English. The strategy here is the same step-by-step process as in part 1, just without the possible answers. So you have to use your brain just a tiny bit more. First, you read the text quickly, and then you analyze the gaps to see if you can find any signal words that might help you choose the correct word for each gap. When we look at the sentence with gap number 9, we can see that there is a causal relationship between our ability to speak and the development of the human brain. Right after the gap, it says of the manner, and the only linking expression that expresses reason followed by of and a noun phrase is because. After you finish the last gap, read the text one more time, just like in part 1, so you can see if everything you wrote makes sense or if you need to change one or two words. Don't skip this part and see it as a safety net, because after all, it can save you a mark or two, which could decide over pass or fail in the exam. In part 3, you get another text with 8 gaps. For each gap, you get one word which you have to change so that the grammar and the meaning fit the sentence perfectly. Part 3 belongs to use of English, and you have to show how well you know word families and if you can change words, especially by using prefixes and suffixes. Before we get into the exact strategy for this part, let me talk about a tiny detail that is often overlooked and causes a lot of problems. The words on the right are already in the correct space and next to the gap where they belong. You don't have to choose which word has to go in which gap, but instead you can simply put the word in the gap that is on the same line. Again, the strategy is very similar to parts 1 and 2. Firstly, read the text quickly and then look at each gap and try to find out what type of word is missing. For example, a noun, verb, adjective or adverb. Also think about if, for example, a noun needs to be in the plural form, or if it is an adjective or an adverb, the negative form. All of these things are crucial to find the correct member of the word family for each gap. Let's look at an example. The sentence with gap 17 talks about opponents and different physical abilities. These abilities are necessary to beat your opponent, and a verb with come that has the same meaning is overcome. The verb form needs to be in the passive voice because of the sentence structure and verb be before the gap. All passive verb forms are made from verb be and the past participle. So overcome, the past participle of overcome, is the correct form to use here. As with parts 1 and 2, you should again read the text one more time to make sure that everything is correct or to make changes if necessary. Part 4 is the first and only part in the exam where you don't have to work with the text. Instead, you get 6 sentence pairs. The first sentence is always complete, while the second one has a gap. You have to fill in the gap with between 3 and 6 words. And there's also a keyword given that you need to use in the gap without changing it. In the end, the 2 sentences need to have the same or at least a meaning that is as similar to each other as possible. In part 4, you have to demonstrate that you can paraphrase, use synonyms, and simply transform grammatical structures. Always remember that the 2 sentences have to be the same or at least as similar as possible in meaning, and that you can't use less than 3 or more than 6 words in the gap. This part is a little bit special in that you can score 2 marks for a completely correct answer. But even if your answer is only partially correct, you might still be able to score 1 mark. So always try to answer everything, because you might get lucky. Now let's have a look at an example. First of all, you should read the 2 sentences carefully and check what pieces of information are already the same. Then I would simply cross these parts out, so you are left with the structure you need to transform and put in the gap. In the next step, we have to keep 2 things in mind. Firstly, you have to use between 3 and 6 words. If you use only one more than 6, you will lose marks. Also, contractions like I'm or don't are counted as 2 words, so please be careful. Can't is the only exception because it contracts cannot, which is just 1 word. Secondly, you have to use the key word in the gap as part of the 3 to 6 words without changing it. With all of that in mind, let's have a look at our example from before again. After crossing out the identical parts in both sentences, we are left with the following to transform. And in the second sentence we can see immediately that we are looking at comparative structures. Far less describes a big difference between 2 things, so we have to reflect that in the gap. Nearly can be used to amplify a comparison, but only in one specific structure, with a negative verb plus as plus adjective or adverb plus as. So the verb is earn, but in the negative form it would be doesn't earn. Next we use the key word nearly, just as we would use far in the first sentence followed by as. The adverb much and the second as are already there right after the gap, so we're done. It is always a good idea to check your sentences one more time before you transfer them onto the answer sheet. Go through each item again one by one and see if the second sentences really have the same meaning as the first ones. This final step is going to help you recognize little mistakes and correct them. In part 5, you have to read a longer text and answer 6 multiple choice questions. The focus in this task is on many different reading skills, like understanding the gist of a text, attitudes, opinions, as well as some more detailed information. Every correct answer is worth 2 marks in this part of the test. Together with parts 1, 6, 7 and 8, part 5 belongs to the reading section of the exam. It is always a good idea to first have a look at the whole text before jumping into detail and looking at the questions. However, because the text is quite long, you have to be able to read quite quickly. Otherwise, you might just lose too much time and not be able to finish this task or the other ones. By reading the text once, you already get a general idea and understanding. You already know what's happening in the text without looking for any specific information. And this general understanding will then later help you answer the questions correctly. Now it is time to look at the questions. Read them carefully and underline important words. Do not look at the answers yet. Cambridge tried to confuse you, but we won't let them do that. We go step by step, because slow and steady wins the race. So make sure that you know exactly what you have to look for in the text. In the first question, there are 2 valuable pieces of information: the problem regarding color and the first paragraph. The questions often tell you where to look. In this case, the first paragraph, so you know where you have to check for the necessary information. Now we can test our comprehension skills and see if we can find the problem the writer is talking about. Look at this paragraph and try to answer the question in your own words. You can pause the video if you want and take a moment to do that. To summarize, the writer sees color as a natural and, more importantly, cultural phenomenon. Color perception changes from culture to culture, but there is not a lot of good literature on the topic. With all of this in mind, let's see if we can find an answer that fits our summary. Option A doesn't work. The text does talk about color and popular culture as a reflection of cultural ideas about color, but not that it works the other way around as well. Option B also doesn't work because the text doesn't mention the number of natural colors at all. Option D talks about books, but the text doesn't talk about any literature that dismisses color as insignificant. That leaves us with option C, which happens to reflect our summary very well. So answer C must be correct. You see, without looking at the possible answers first, we keep our mind clear and unpolluted, so we can really focus on the text and then later find the answer that fits our own idea. Hopefully, you did such a good job in steps 1 to 4 that you don't even have to worry about this last step anymore. However, sometimes we are simply not quite sure which option to choose because none of them is perfectly the same or even similar to what we found in the text. In this case, you just have to go back to the text, read the passage again, and then decide which answer you think is correct. In part 6, you get 4 short texts and 4 questions. You have to read across those 4 texts in order to be able to answer each question. Just like in parts 4 and 5, you get 2 marks for each correct answer. As always, It can't be a mistake to read the 4 different texts once in order to get a general idea of the opinions and attitudes expressed. You can also already start underlining certain attitudes or opinions that you find are particularly similar or different between the different parts. Next, you read the questions and underline the key parts so it is clear what exactly you have to look for. In question 37, we need to find the one reviewer that thinks differently about de Botton's level of confidence when it comes to the topic of the text. Now it is time to go back to the text and search for the information that the questions dictate. In this step, you need to show that you can scan a text for very specific information, but you also need to show that you did your homework during the first read-through, as we can usually find the differences based on our general feel for the different writers' opinions and attitudes. Looking for clues for what the writers think about de Botton's level of confidence in his arguments, we get to the following. The underlined parts show what each reviewer thinks about what question 37 wants us to find out, and it is time for the next step in our foolproof process. Last but not least, we need to look at the information we extracted from the texts from the perspective of the question we are trying to answer. In this case, we have to find the one opinion that differs from the others. In texts A, C and D, we find words and phrases like brave, self-assurance, bold, amusing judgments, and conviction, while in text B the reviewer describes the same point with de Botton's need for help from other authors, which definitely sounds much more negative than the other 3 reviews. Concluding our analysis, we can confidently choose text B as the correct answer for question 37. Repeat these steps for the other questions and you will see that part 6 is not that daunting after all. In part 7, you get a text from which 6 whole paragraphs have been removed. You have to choose the missing paragraphs from 7 possible options, which means that there is 1 extra paragraph which you don't have to use. Again, you score 2 marks for each correct answer in part 7. Reading and Use of English part 7 examines your understanding of the structure and the flow of a text, rather than just certain language features. As I've mentioned before, part 7 also belongs to the reading portion of the exam. By now, you should know what the first step looks like. Exactly. Read the text once to get a general understanding. You are good students. In this part, I even recommend making a short note next to each paragraph, so you know what each individual part of the text talks about. But have a look at this example. You can see the first 2 paragraphs of our example from earlier, and I've already added my little comments on the left. They are really short and get straight to the point. You don't want to spend too much time on this step, but you also want to make sure that you can simply read the comment and remember immediately what each paragraph talks about. After looking at the text, you should now spend some time on the missing paragraphs. As Reading and Use of English Part 6 looks at the progression, structure and flow of a text rather than simple language links, it makes sense to treat the missing paragraphs the same way we did with the paragraphs in the text. Quickly read the different possible paragraphs and make a quick note of what each of them talks about. Just as we did in the previous step, we also summarize the paragraphs so we know what they are talking about. However, the analysis is not completely done. We should also look at certain words that might help us connect the paragraphs to what is said in the text. Let's take another look at our 2 examples. In paragraph F, we find the determiner this, while in G, we can see the pronoun it. Both of them are not explained in their respective parts, so there must be some information in the text that lets us connect the paragraphs to other sections. With the previous steps, we've laid the foundation for what comes next, matching the paragraphs to the gaps in the text. Our goal is to find links between the different parts in order to help with the text's progression. Remember that we found the pronoun it in paragraph G and wondered what it means? It means the painting on the author's wall. This is complemented by the next paragraph in the text. While paragraph G describes the similarities in personality between a wild cat and a domestic cat, the following section in the text points out the physical differences. This contrast adds to the logical development of the text, so paragraph G is a perfect match. Of course, you need to repeat this step for the other gaps as well, but I hope that this example has given you an idea of what to do. Once you've chosen your paragraphs for the text, of course it makes a lot of sense to read the whole text one more time, including the paragraphs that you've chosen, just to see if the text has a good flow to it, if it sounds like it makes sense, or if you want to replace one or two of the paragraphs that you've chosen. Always remember to proofread your work, because you've already invested so much time to score those marks, so you don't want to lose them that easily. In part 8, you read either one longer text or several shorter texts, and you get 10 questions. Each question or prompt needs to be matched to one of the parts. Each part might contain the answer to more than just one question. And unlike the previous parts, you only get 1 mark for each correct answer. What do you think is the first step in part 8? Reading the text? Wrong. In part 8, you want to look at the questions first. Make sure you read the questions or prompts very carefully and underline the key words so you know exactly what you're looking for in the text. As you can see in the 2 example prompts, I've already underlined the key information, so we know exactly what the questions ask for. Repeat this for the other questions and you are ready to go. One of the biggest mistakes that candidates make in part 8 of Reading in Use of English is that they want to go through the task question by question, which can cost you a lot of time because you might have to read the text 4, 5 or 6 times before you find all the answers to the different questions. Instead, I would go through this task paragraph by paragraph. Start with the first part of the text and see which questions you can answer in this part. This way, you only have to read each part twice or maybe 3 times before you get through everything and finish. So start with part A and read it carefully, looking for information that might answer any of the questions. In our example task, that might look like this. In the text by consultant A, I underlined the information that gives us the answer to 2 of the prompts in the task, number 50 and 54. As soon as you are sure that you found a match, write down the answer and forget about it. Don't doubt yourself or change your answers, as this is just a waste of time. In part 8, you only get 1 mark for each correct answer, so don't spend too much time trying to figure out which text is better than another one. After you are done with part A, rinse and repeat and do the same with the other parts. With each completed paragraph, the number of questions becomes smaller and smaller, so you should be able to speed things up the deeper you get into the task. Very quickly, before we finish this video, I just wanted to give you some general ideas that might be worth thinking about. First of all, remember that you can choose the order in which you want to go through the different tasks. It can make a lot of sense for you to consider which order or which sequence might make most sense for you. Some people prefer starting with parts 5 and 8, so they do the longer reading tasks first and are not so tired once they get there. Others want to start with the tasks where you can score 2 marks, parts 4 to 7, so they can gobble up some marks right at the beginning of the test and leave the parts with only 1 mark to the end. At the end of the day, all I want you to think about is which sequence of tasks is best for you, which sequence might save you time and enable you to score as many marks as possible. Secondly, as you only have 90 minutes to finish everything, including the transfer of your answers onto the other answer sheet, you should be able to know how much time you need for each individual part, so you can practice the ones that you feel too slow at, and you can focus on improving your overall time. Okay, that's it. Now you know everything you need to be successful in reading and use of English. I hope this video helps you and makes you feel a little bit more confident. And of course, I hope that my little tips and tricks help you score a few more marks. And you can also check out all the articles about the different tasks on my website. All the links are in the description box below, and I see you in the next video.